At first, it didn't feel like a royal story. It felt like a missing person mystery happening in plain sight. One day, the Princess of Wales was part of the national routine, and then suddenly, she wasn't. And the longer the silence stretched, the louder the internet got. Until the conversation stopped being about a woman recovering from surgery and turned into a global obsession with one question: what aren't they telling us? It started in January 2024, when Kensington Palace announced Catherine had undergone abdominal surgery and would step back from public duties while she recovered. On paper, that should have been simple. People get sick, people heal. But royals aren't treated like people online. They're treated like symbols. And symbols aren't allowed to disappear without explanation. So the gap where Catherine usually was became a blank space that millions tried to fill with guesses, theories, and someone said whispers. AP News +1, and here's the part most people miss. The palace didn't just go quiet, it tried to manage quiet. It put out measured updates, tried to keep things calm, and assumed the public would accept the boundary. But the modern attention span doesn't accept boundaries. It pokes them, it tests them, it turns them into content. And once that cycle starts, it doesn't slow down on its own. But then one photo was supposed to stop the noise, and it ended up multiplying it. In March 2024, a Mother's Day family photo of Catherine with her children was released. It looked like a relief, proof of life, a sign she was okay. Except within hours, people noticed inconsistencies and major news agencies pulled the image, saying it had been manipulated. That's when the story shifted from, "Where is she?" to, "Can we trust what we're seeing?" And Catherine did something rare in the middle of a PR storm. She owned it. She apologized for confusion and said she'd experimented with editing, like many amateur photographers do. AP News +1 to some people, that should have ended it. To others, it made everything worse because it proved the palace could be imperfect, and imperfection online gets treated like evidence. The photo became a symbol of a bigger problem. The monarchy is built on controlled images, and the internet is built on tearing controlled images apart. Those two worlds were always going to clash. The only surprise was how fast it happened. And just as the speculation hit its loudest point, Catherine spoke in her own voice, and the entire tone of the conversation changed. Overnight, on March 22, 2024, Catherine revealed she had been diagnosed with cancer and was in the early stages of preventative chemotherapy. It wasn't a tabloid leak. It wasn't a palace source. It was her, speaking directly, describing it as a huge shock and asking for time, space, and privacy. And suddenly the internet, which had been acting like a detective, had to become human again. The Guardian +1, but even that phrase, preventative chemotherapy, had people pausing. It's not a phrase everyone hears in everyday life. In simple terms, it generally means chemo used to reduce the risk of cancer returning, often after surgery. It wasn't giving away all her details, and it wasn't meant to. But the lack of specifics created a strange split, a wave of support, and a wave of hunger for more information. ABC, that's the uncomfortable truth about public illness. People can be kind and curious at the same time. They can be supportive and intrusive in the same sentence. And when the person is Catherine Soane, millions have watched grow from a university student into the future. Queen, the emotional attachment is intense. For a lot of families, especially those touched by cancer, her announcement didn't feel like celebrity news. It felt like a mirror. And once someone becomes a mirror, the pressure gets brutal, because now Catherine wasn't just Catherine. She became a story, a symbol of strength, a headline people use to inspire themselves, and that sounds nice until you realize what it demands from the person living it. If you're a symbol, people want a clean narrative. They want a beginning, a battle, and a win. They want the lesson wrapped with a bow. EAL. Life doesn't work like that. Over the months that followed, the palace kept updates limited, and Catherine stayed mostly out of sight. That quiet wasn't just about privacy. It was about reality. Treatment is exhausting, unpredictable, and messy, and it rarely matches the tidy storyline the public expects. Still, the emotional investment didn't fade. It grew. People weren't just hoping she would be okay. They needed her to be okay because her recovery felt like proof that things can turn out fine. In September 2024, she delivered the line the world had been waiting for. On September 9, 2024, Catherine announced she had completed chemotherapy. She described the months as incredibly tough and made it clear that the road wasn't suddenly over just because treatment ended. That one detail mattered because it pushed back against the fairy tale version of recovery. Finishing treatment isn't the same as being back. It's often the start of learning how to live in a body that's been through a war. ABC News +1, and that's where the story gets more interesting, not because it becomes more dramatic, but because it becomes more honest. A lot of public figures disappear during illness and return later with a simple, "I'm fine now." Catherine didn't do that. She didn't pretend the finish line was a magic reset. She warned people, gently, that recovery is its own chapter. That message hit hard for anyone who's been through cancer, alongside a parent, a spouse, or a friend. Because the part nobody prepares you for is the after. The checkups, the fatigue, the anxiety your body carries like an echo. Then, in January 2025, she made a move that felt less like royal branding and more like something personal. On January 14, 2025, Catherine said she was in remission. She called it a relief and said she was focused on recovery and adjusting to a new normal. That same day, she visited the Royal Marsden Hospital, where she had been treated, to thank staff and meet patients. And Kensington Palace announced that she and Prince William would become joint patrons of the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation. TrustPeople.com, +3 Reuters, +3 ABC, +3 ABC, +3. If you want to understand why people reacted so strongly, it's right there. Remission wasn't framed as the end. It was framed as a turning point. Relief, yes, but also realism. The world loves a comeback, but Catherine was basically saying, "I'm not rushing back to the old version of me," and that's where the internet had to learn a new lesson. Remission doesn't mean your schedule can go back to normal. Your body sets the pace, not the headlines. That reality showed up again in 2025 in small, quiet moments that casual viewers might not even notice, but that royal watchers read like tea leaves. One of the biggest examples came in June 2025. When Catherine pulled out of attending Royal Ascot, reports said she was disappointed. But the bigger point was obvious. Even with remission, even with progress, she was still carefully managing what she could handle. The Guardian. And here's where things get tricky for public perception. Every cancellation becomes a signal. Every absence becomes a theory. People who lived through the 2024 silence were primed to assume the worst, even when the reason might be simple. She's pacing herself. She's doing what doctors tell most patients to do. Listen to your body, don't force it, and accept that recovery isn't linear. But the internet doesn't love linear. It loves suspense. So Catherine's return in 2025 wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a slow re-entry, measured engagements, careful appearances, and a clear message that she would define what BACA looks like. That approach is also why some outlets in late 2025 described her as gradually re-emerging and rebuilding confidence. Rather than fully returned, People.com +1 by the end of 2025. There were more signs that the family was stepping into a steadier phase, reports tracking official engagements suggested. Catherine carried out a limited number compared to other senior royals, a reminder that her public role was still being balanced against recovery. People.com +1. And then came one of the most quietly emotional details of the year. The place where she was treated kept showing up in her public story. In December 2025, Catherine donated a Christmas tree from her Together at Christmas carol service to the Royal Marsden's Oak Cancer Center, linking her signature royal event to the hospital that carried her through 2024. Yes, but it also felt like gratitude made visible. A way of saying, without a speech, "I didn't get through this alone." People.com +1. And that brings us to the part that most competitor-style scripts often get wrong. They chase the biggest possible drama, even if it means inventing details. The real pull of Catherine's story isn't some secret catastrophe. It's the collision between a controlled institution and an uncontrollable human reality. Because when Catherine disappeared, the public didn't just get curious, it got entitled. When the photo controversy hit, people didn't just criticize, they questioned what's real. And when she finally spoke, the world had to confront something uncomfortable. Behind the monarchy's polished image is a family dealing with the same fear, treatment, and uncertainty that millions face. So, if there's one revealed truth here, it's not a hidden diagnosis or a dark palace secret. It's this: public narratives move faster than real healing ever can. And when that happens, the person at the center gets turned into a headline-shaped version of themselves. Catherine's timeline surgery. Silence. A photo that backfired. A diagnosis revealed in her own words. Treatment completed. Remission announced, and a careful return. And if you zoom in on the timeline, the real suspense isn't what happened. It's how the story kept changing shape depending on who was telling it. Because in January 2024, the palace message was straightforward: planned abdominal surgery, successful procedure, and a long recovery. With a return to duties expected after Easter, clean, controlled, and deliberately limited. The royal family, but the internet doesn't treat limited like a boundary. It treats it like a challenge. And when there's a gap between what people want to know and what they're being told, that gap fills itself. A few weeks later, Kensington Palace confirmed she'd returned home to continue recovery. Again, calm language. Again, minimal detail. Sky News, and that's where the modern royal problem really kicks in. A statement like that used to be enough. In 2024, it's basically fuel. Not because it's suspicious on its own, but because it's incomplete. And incompleteness invites people to finish the story themselves. That's why the Mother's Day photo became such a turning point. It wasn't just a picture. It was the palace trying to visually restore normality in a moment where the public didn't trust the narrative anymore. And when agencies pulled it, and Catherine apologized for the edits, it created an awkward truth, even if there was no bad intent. The palace looked like it had lost control of the simplest thing, a family photo. The Guardian +1 then came the moment that stopped the guessing and replaced it with something heavier. Catherine's March 22nd video message didn't just confirm cancer and preventative chemotherapy. It also explained why the family stayed quiet. They wanted time to process and to tell their children in an age-appropriate way. That detail mattered because it reframed the silence as protection, not secrecy. NBC Chicago, and once the public heard her voice, the entire vibe shifted from conspiracy to compassion almost instantly. But compassion doesn't erase curiosity. It just changes how people justify it. Because right after March 22nd, a different kind of obsession took over the comeback clock. People started watching for signs of progress, like they were tracking a sports season. Every new update became a scorecard. And in early 2024, palace messaging even emphasized it would only provide significant updates, which told the public to expect silence unless something major changed. Reuters, that set the stage for the next hook. When she finally reappeared, it wasn't random. It was strategic. In June 2024, Catherine released a statement saying she was making good progress, but that treatment was ongoing, and she planned to attend Trooping the Color. That one line did a lot of work. It offered hope without pretending she was fine. PBS +1. And when she appeared at Trooping the Color on June 15th, her first public appearance since revealing the diagnosis, it landed like a national exhale. The Guardian +1, what people often forget, is how carefully that moment was designed. Not in a fake, sinister way, in a realistic way. Because for someone in treatment, even standing and waving can be a huge physical demand. So the appearance wasn't framed as she's back. It was framed as she's here, briefly, and she's still in this fight. And that distinction kept expectations from exploding, at least for a while. But then Wimbledon happened, and the emotion got louder again. On July 14, 2024, Catherine attended the Wimbledon men's final and received a standing ovation. That wasn't just polite applause. It was the crowd turning support into a moment you could hear. Reuters +1, and it mattered, because Wimbledon isn't just any event for her. She's patron of the All England Club, and it's one of the few places where she's always looked completely in her element. So seeing her there sent a message. People understood instantly. She wanted normal life back too, and still, she didn't overdo it. That's the pattern that keeps showing up. A meaningful appearance, then quiet again. A reminder that recovery isn't a straight line, and it isn't a performance. By September 2024, when she announced she had completed chemotherapy, she described the previous months as extremely tough and emphasized that full recovery would take time, step by step. Reuters +1, that step-by-step phrase, is the kind of detail that sounds simple, but it's actually a boundary. It's her saying, "Don't demand the old pace. Don't treat this like a movie ending. Don't rush me into being the version of me you're used to." And yet, the pressure always returns, because the public doesn't just watch royals, it projects onto them. That's why the January 2025 update hit so hard. When Catherine said it was a relief to be in remission, it felt like the happy ending people were waiting for. Reuters Plus One, but then she did something that made the moment deeper. She visited the Royal Marsden, the hospital where she was treated, and spoke to patients and staff. And the patronage announcement followed she and William becoming joint patrons of the Royal Marsden. NHS Foundation Trust, Royal Marsden Plus One, that combination was powerful for two reasons. First, it quietly confirmed where she'd been receiving care, without turning it into spectacle. Second, it redirected the story away from gossip and toward impact. It wasn't, "Look at me, I survived." It was, "I'm grateful." That's not a PR line. That's someone trying to make meaning out of a year that changed her life. But here's where the audience has to unlearn something. Remission is a milestone. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't switch your body back to factory settings. It doesn't erase the mental weight of scans, follow-ups, exhaustion, and the constant question in the back of your mind, what if? So when 2025 rolled on and Catherine began doing more, it wasn't a grand return. It was a cautious rebuild. And because people had been trained by the earlier silence to treat everything as a clue, even normal pacing decisions got interpreted like drama. June 2025 is the best example of that. Around mid-June, she appeared at major royal moments, including the Order of the Garter service at Windsor Castle, which is one of those heavy institution events that royals rarely skip unless they have to. The royal family then, shortly after, she pulled out of Royal Ascot, with reporting emphasizing that she was trying to find the right balance as she returned to public engagements. Reuters Plus One, that's the exact tension Catherine's whole year created. If she shows up, people treat it like proof she's back. If she doesn't, people treat it like panic. But the truth can be much simpler than both extremes. The body decides the schedule, and balance is what recovery looks like in real life. And by late 2025, another subtle shift became clear. Catherine wasn't just returning, she was reshaping what her role looks like after illness. You can see it in how her signature projects kept moving forward, especially the ones tied to community and support. You can also see it in what she chose to highlight publicly. Not endless updates, not medical details, but small gestures that connect her story to other people's stories, like the Christmas tree donation. In December 2025, reporting and posts from the Royal Marsden highlighted that Catherine donated a Christmas tree from her, together at Christmas Carol service at Westminster Abbey, to the Oak Cancer Center. In Style Plus One, it's the kind of move that sounds simple until you catch the emotional subtext. She took something from a public celebration she hosts and redirected it to the place that represents the hardest chapter of her life. And the carol service itself, filmed on December 5th and broadcast on Christmas Eve, even included a surprise moment with Princess Charlotte joining her for a piano duet. Another signal that Catherine's return is being stitched into family, not just duty. People.com. So when people ask, what's the real story here? It's not some secret emergency announcement or a hidden palace plot. Those versions spread fast because they're dramatic, but they also flatten a real human experience into clickbait. The real story is more unsettling in a quieter way. The monarchy runs on image control, and illness destroys image control. It forces honesty. It creates gaps. It reveals how hungry the public is for certainty and how little certainty medicine ever provides. That's why Catherine's timeline keeps pulling people back in. Not because it's an unsolved mystery, but because it shows how quickly a public narrative can outrun a person's actual life. January 2024. Surgery, long recovery predicted. The royal family, March 2024, the photo controversy and the apology. The Guardian Plus One, March 22, 2024, cancer revealed, preventative chemotherapy. NBC Chicago, June and July 2024, carefully chosen appearances, not a full comeback. The Guardian, plus the 1st of September 2024, chemo completed, but recovery still ongoing. Reuters, January 2025, remission, gratitude, and the Royal Marsden connection made official. Reuters, plus the 1st of June 2025, Balance becomes the key word. And cancellations stop being drama and start being reality. Reuters plus the 1st of December 2025. Quiet gestures tie the whole arc together. Instagram plus one, and the thought that lingers after all of it is this. Catherine didn't just reveal a diagnosis. She revealed how messy public empathy can be. How quickly people can turn support into surveillance. How a family can ask for privacy and still be treated like they owe the world a storyline. So the next time a headline tries to sell you the final chapter, remember what Catherine herself kept hinting at. There isn't a final chapter on a schedule. There's only the next step, the next scan, the next good day, the next hard day. And that's what makes her story stick, not because it's perfect, but because it refuses to pretend it is.